Hello everybody, this is Tim. This is going to be the beginning of a series of videos that try to incorporate some ideas from group counseling into role-playing games. And as you see the little diagram I kind of whipped up there, it's a little tiny dragon's head in the center. The area that I'm going to focus on is the area where group counseling and RPGs have very similar interests and I think can benefit from one another. It's not your stereotypical RPG video on YouTube, so I wanted to just basically do something a little bit different and see where it took me. And there were some interesting insights that I got from this book that might actually take some time to implement into the way I run games, but I just like to read things that make me think, and this definitely got me thinking about RPGs. Well, to start, this is basically just going to be an introduction. And I basically just went through this book with a highlighter, and anything that I thought sounded cool or could be used or could be beneficial to basically anybody who runs groups, that I would just talk about that stuff. So one reason for having groups to begin with is a greater variety of resources and viewpoints. Whether they are sharing information, solving a problem, or exploring personal values, the presence of other people often offers more viewpoints and hence resources. Group members often relate that one of the most helpful aspects of their group is the variety of viewpoints expressed and discussed. And these would be the RPG players and the GM themselves. Members usually will have a variety of opinions and ideas, thus making the experience interesting and closer to real life. And as you're running a campaign, you want, yes, to have a little bit of reality in there, but you don't want, you just basically, it's good to have different viewpoints, especially when you're in character. And, different people often bring different things they incorporate into their characters. Some reasons that are basically common to groups. The feeling of sharing common ground, the experience of belonging, basically having some place to go to, once a week or once every 2 weeks. The opportunities for varied feedback, and vicarious learning from others. Basically just learning from other people. And since I've been in RPGs, I've been exposed to a lot of different people from a lot of different backgrounds that I wouldn't normally bump into. So I can definitely see this viewpoint. And the peer pressure to maintain commitment. I don't know if this happens in your group, but the groups I've been in, we don't like people that are kind of flaky. We like people that communicate well, especially if they can't come. If they have legitimate reasons for not being there, that's one thing, that's cool. But it's just the communication thing, just if you can make it, please try to make it. We want to have a good consistent group, those sorts of things. The feeling of commonality is helpful and therapeutic to most individuals. Just getting together for a common purpose, just sorts of help, just a generally good thing to do as a person. Talks a little bit about the sense of belonging. Many writers of basically counseling and psychology have commented on the powerful human need to belong. This need can be satisfied in part by being in a group. Members of these groups have said that the experience of being accepted was one of the most important features of the group. And a lot of these things that are mentioned in this book are things that I don't know if I've necessarily thought about, because it's, they're coming from a slightly different angle, but, things like belonging, a sense of commonality, these sorts of things are definitely there in RPGs. You get together with a bunch of friends / acquaintances / new people, and you have a common purpose, and, you feel like you belong to the group, and it was just all interesting. There's a sense of unconditional positive regard, and this can facilitate the development of a healthy personality. So, that idea in and of itself is that, role-playing games can benefit you. Talks about skill practice. Groups provide an arena for safe practice. Members practice some new skills and behaviors they have learned in a supportive environment before trying them out in real-world contexts. The range of new behaviors to explore is nearly infinite. Leaders can set up role-play situations in which members can practice being assertive and developing social skills. And this is, this is actually coming from where they use role-playing in group counseling. Like, you're going to be my father, and I'm going to be this person, and we're going to talk about things. But this is actually why we're getting together in a role-playing game, to talk about things, to experience things. I know in my own personal life, role-playing games have really helped me become less shy, a little bit less introverted, and they've given me social skills where I can interact with people more. I'm not as scared to maybe try something that I've already done in an RPG. That sounds kind of weird, but being assertive, being more, I don't know, this is going to sound like a little bit of a self-help thing, so that's just part of it. But basically that, social interaction is a good thing, and role-playing games definitely do that. They help in that regard. Talks about feedback. Groups provide the opportunity for members to receive feedback. Frequently, members will have the opportunity to hear both first impressions and updated impressions as the group goes on. When only one person is giving feedback, the receiver can dismiss that person's viewpoint. But when 6 or 7 people are saying the same thing, it is hard to deny what is being said. Maybe you think, I'm really not that great of a GM, but, everyone really seemed to have a good time last night, and, maybe I'm just being too hard on myself, or, maybe this is like where my perfectionism of trying to become the best GM comes in. There are many kinds of feedback and ways of giving feedback in a group. Sometimes even nonverbal, which is interesting. I didn't actually think about that. As I go through this book, I'll be skipping various pages. Many leaders can make the mistake of overleading, which sometimes prevents members from sharing or taking part, or in our case, role-playing, their character. Sometimes it's best to, as a GM, to be silent, and sometimes that can actually be tough. I've often said that artists generally know when not to do something, when not to put additional stuff on the, in their painting or in their drawing or whatever. It's basically that the knowledge of when to be quiet and when to speak up. So sometimes be careful. Sometimes it's best to just sit back and see what the players do and what happens. In some groups, the members stay focused on their own. Let's talk about focus a little bit. Then the role of the leader is more facilitative, basically to just help them perhaps role play between one another, where you're not actually doing anything from your prep work. This is really just character and character talking. In other groups, discussion becomes unfocused or conflict breaks out among members. In such instances, the GM intervenes and deals with the various disruptive members or players in order to bring the group back to the task. Sometimes the leader even lets the focus blur in order to resolve other issues. So just, sometimes the GM has to be sort of the guiding hand to try to get the focus back to what you're actually there for, the game. Things like table talk and, going on and on about stuff outside of the game. The rationale for limiting the leader to a facilitative role is the assumption that with guidance, group members possess the ability and resources to help themselves and one another. Now for us, that pretty much means just, PC talking to each other, perhaps like a planning stage before they go on and do some sort of mission. But I know with myself after reading this, I think I do overlead at times. I think I do kind of butt my nose in where maybe it's not wanted. So that makes me think that, when the players are talking to each other, just remember that, that's their time to shine. And yes, I want to help them, but sometimes it's best, and I think others have said, just to let their decisions have the consequences that, should be there, that sort of thing. Some more things. There's 3 general styles of leadership: authoritarian, democratic, and laissez-faire. And that just talks about like how you can go about running your group. Authoritarian is like these are my rules, you're living by them. Democratic is more, okay, how do we all want to do this? And laissez-faire is basically like there's just a very bare minimum of rules at all. Talks about other types like energizers, providers, social engineers, impersonals, laissez-faires, and managers. So there's various ways to describe how your style is, and as gamers, I'm sure we would use different terms, but this is coming from group counseling. Two other terms that have been used to describe group leaders are group-centered and leader-centered. And I would consider, like most traditional RPGs, to be leader-centered, but that's not always the case. GM-less games would definitely be more group-centered, I would think. But, depending on how you run your group, that might not be true. A group in which the members were mainly responsible would be group-centered. One in which the leader was mainly responsible would be leader-centered. A leader who is in a leader-centered group in her approach is usually more active. So, for most of us GMs, I think that's us. Beginning leaders should try out different levels of involvement, especially as they lead various kinds of groups. Just because your last group liked a certain thing doesn't mean maybe a new group you're starting will like the same things. You really have to kind of play it by ear. Just as a 5-iron in golf cannot handle every situation presented on the course, neither can any specific style of group leadership handle all the situations that will arise. So even if your group does like you to have a certain style, be willing to change it up. Be willing to do something different. The leader may provide emotional stimulation, praise, interpretations, and explanations for your players. He can set limits, enforce rules, and manage the time. I think managing the time is a big thing for a GM. The leader may perform many different roles and functions. So as a GM, you really are going to be like a jack of all trades. Different kinds of groups require different styles and functions, so you really have to know your group, as I've said before, and see what they like, what works for them, and a lot of times you have to experiment. I'm going to try this week and see if that works, see if, this last thing that I did in the last session didn't seem to really work, so I'm going to try something different. There are times when the leader needs to be directive in order to keep the group focused on the task. If they're just not focused on the story, if they're not even focused on playing, you might have to reel them back in, or that's an interesting story about work, but let's get back into playing the game. The GM basically has to provide confrontation and structure, and most of the time be a good host if it's at their place. It might be at a gaming store or something. And another topic here is what makes an effective GM or leader. Flexibility, objectivity, trustworthiness, honesty, strength, and patience. Additional leadership characteristics might be comfort with oneself and others, a liking for people, comfort in a position of authority, confidence in one's ability to lead, and the ability to read others well. That is, to be tuned into others' feelings, reactions, moods, and words. Finally, the effective leader is psychologically healthy. I don't know if we're all psychologically healthy, but I guess that helps. Some might even say that being a little messed up might actually help, with your creativity. Leading groups successfully does require a great deal from the leader or the GM, and often people lead groups when they simply do not possess the necessary leadership characteristics. And this would be those people that get kind of roped into GMing, even though they're not the most comfortable being there. I know I've been in that position, and I think I've gotten over that completely, or at least maybe 99% of it. But yeah, there are definitely people running games that would more likely be trying to be a player. Experience with groups. In the development of any skill, practice and experience increase one's effectiveness. The effective leader has led many groups. There is no point, therefore, in the novice leader's being overly critical of himself due to his lack of experience. He probably will not be highly skilled, but can try to learn from mistakes and from each leadership experience. If the novice does this, his skills will most likely improve. It is advisable to begin, if possible, by leading groups. And this is basically saying just don't be too hard on yourself. If you've never ran a game before, everyone has to start out with their first game. Sure, I think GMs today have a lot more resources to help them try to figure out how to run games. But when it's your first campaign, you're going to be anxious. You're going to be nervous. You're going to screw up. you might screw up majorly. Just don't beat yourself up over it. Just learn from your failures, learn from your mistakes, and move on. The effective leader can plan a session and a series of sessions in such a way that the group is interesting, beneficial, and personally valuable. But again, if you make a plan, don't be afraid to deviate from it if the players and their characters make choices that go off the beaten path. These are things you get better at with time, in my experience. If you're a new GM, that might be tough. But again, as you play and run games, you're going to learn how to do these things. The leader will usually want to allow time for warming up, or like tabletop before you guys start playing. Basically, just finding out what's going on in the players' lives, sharing amongst themselves, perhaps even summarizing the end of last session, and talking about any debatable things that happened in the game. Maybe somebody stole something from another character, and okay, guys, that's not so cool. Or maybe it came down to sharing the treasure, and there were some shenanigans going on there. So before you start playing, sometimes it's best to have, I don't know, like 10 minutes, maybe a half an hour, depending on your group, to just talk and then get in the mindset of getting ready to roleplay. Talks about a good understanding of the basic human conflicts and dilemmas. The leader of almost any kind of group must be prepared to deal with a number of human problems. And these are things of your actual players and things in life that are going on with their family members and health issues, etc. This I think really goes back to a GM being flexible. Some other stuff. Basically, it talks about good GMing skills, good leadership skills, such as not trying to dominate this basically the topic, be chit-chatty rather than focused on what's going on. Things like attending sporadically. This is really tough for really bad for a GM to not be there. And again, this goes for players. Basically, this is for everybody. Things like being shy and withdrawn, people getting angry at the GM, people getting angry with other players, trying to force others to speak. Sometimes people just don't want to speak. Yes, you want to have everybody participate, but some people participate more. Some players are resistant. Some players dislike other members. Some people just stop attending the group, and you try to find out why. As you can see, GMs must be able to deal with all kinds of members and situations, and there will be another video talking about that to some degree. In our discussion of GM styles, we stress the importance of not being limited to one style, since different kinds of groups have different purposes, and require that the leader adjust her style accordingly. So basically, when you're running a group, and we're going to talk more about this stuff, being flexible and being able to take all kinds of players from all walks of life and try to have them focused on the game and try to basically just make it fun. Okay, I'll continue to do these videos, and hopefully you guys enjoy them. I'll talk to you later.